кожен пливе, поки хвиля несе, і поки глибока вода, глибока і темна до самого дна, до самого дна. На глибині зустрічаються всі, так ніби в морі місця нема, і труться бортами, аж стогне земля від зависті, підлості і зла. Хтось не доплив, бо йому помогли набрати повні трюми води, постати героями тої війни. Дуже хотіли вони, а до берега тихо хвилі несуть поранені душі живих кораблів, а від берега знову в море йдуть ті, хто вірив і правду знати хотів. Наш океан знає більше, ніж ми, секрети всі у нього на дні, а ми ходим зверху, великі й малі, люди, як кораблі, гордо пливем, і не вірить ніхто, що ним зацікавило зло. І серед вітрів ми не чуєм щурів, які прогризають нам дно, а до берега тихо хвилі несуть поранені душі живих кораблів, а від берега знову в море йдуть ті, хто вірив і правду знати хотів, а до берега тихо хвилі несуть поранені душі живих кораблів, а від берега знову в море йдуть ті, хто вірив і правду знати хотів.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all very much for joining us this week's United for Ukraine session. As always, we're here every week, United for Ukraine, and in solidarity with other countries and regions facing conflict. Very glad to see a good number of people in the room today. So not to take too much of our time, we're going to start immediately. So please, if you know anyone that would love to be in the room, please do feel free to reach out to them and let them know that we have started and this week's session has started. So they can please come and join the room. So today we have a special event, as you have probably seen, posted on the forum and in our live mail. So we'll start off with the Ukrainian national anthem, and we'll give a quick update on the latest happenings in Ukraine. And after that, we'll open the floor to hear our voices. And once we have gotten some raised hands, we will then transition to today's events, which will be anchored or managed by our UPG Peace ambassadors. So we'll start off first with the Ukrainian national anthem.
Не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля, ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануєм ми, браття, у своїй сторонці, душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
All right, so I'll quickly share updates. As I said, welcome to this week's United for Ukraine session. We're in day 1161, and this is our 163rd session so far. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened on the 24th of February 2022, and the United for Ukraine session has been launched since the 16th of March 2022. As a result of Russia's full-scale invasion, there was a prompt international outrage which led to widespread economic sanctions against Russia, as well as military and humanitarian support for Ukraine in many countries. The invasion has also led to several severe humanitarian crises, with millions of Ukrainians displaced. There has been fighting has continued in various regions, with heavy casualties on both sides and ongoing geopolitical ramifications. The invasion has also dramatically altered the geopolitical landscape in Europe and beyond, raising concerns about security, energy dependence, and international law. Efforts for a diplomatic resolution remains ongoing. Conflict shows little or no sign. So this initiative has Stand United for Ukraine, which is a weekly session where we get updates on the latest happenings, and we also provide a safe space for us to share our thoughts. We also stand in solidarity with other countries or regions facing conflict, and we hold sessions to spotlight and highlight this conflict, providing possible resolutions and possible means of resolution. In today's conversation, we'll be getting latest updates on Ukraine, and we'll be also discussing whether a path to peace can be established or if the conflict will continue unabated. We also have a special event, which will be discussing the deportation of Crimean Tatars in 1944 as a crime against humanity. We have a special guest speaker for that. Just trying to manage time. We have two major updates in which Russian President Vladimir Putin announces a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine. And the temporary ceasefire is supposed to start from May 8th to 10th to celebrate Victory Day. This is a map showing current situations of things, access control of terrain in the Russia-Ukraine war as of April 26. So we see places that faced significant fighting in the past 24 hours, which is the Sumy region. And Russia controlled Ukrainian territory before 24 February 2024. And then Russian controlled Ukrainian territory, and Russia advances in Ukraine. Here's the latest news updates. Battlefield developments. We see Russia drone attacks. On April 29th, Russian drones swarmed, targeted the Ukrainian cities of Kharkiv and Dnipro, which resulted in at least one death and multiple injuries. There has also been increased fighting despite the ceasefire talks, which is despite Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement of a unilateral ceasefire from May 8th to 10th to commemorate the sovereign's World War II victory. Ukrainian military officials report intensified Russian combat activities, particularly around the Pokrovsk region in eastern Ukraine. There have also been recent attacks on civilians as of April 24, missile strike on Kyiv, which killed 13 people and injured over 90, marking one of the deadliest attacks on the capital since 2022. Also, earlier on April 13th, a Russian missile attack on the Sumy region killed at least 36 civilians during the Palm Sunday active services, making it the deadliest attack Russian civilian since 2023. Diplomatic and political developments, ceasefire negotiations. Russian officials have announced the initiation of direct talks with Ukraine, proposing a ceasefire tied to Victory Day commemorations. However, Ukrainian officials have not confirmed participation, and President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for an immediate 30-day ceasefire. Territorial demands. President Putin insists that Russia must gain control over 4 Ukrainian regions not fully occupied as part of any peace agreement, a stance that complicates diplomatic efforts. International involvement.
Gochi, are you here?
Work towards ending the war. Saudi Arabia played a mediating role in recent discussions. In late April, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was welcomed to Pretoria's Union building by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa for a historic visit, because it is the first by a Ukrainian head of state in the 33 years since the post-apartheid establishment of diplomatic relations. Humanitarian and civil impacts, civilian casualties. The recent attacks in Kharkiv, Dnipro, Kyiv, and Sumy have resulted in significant civilian casualties, highlighting the ongoing humanitarian crisis. War crimes allegations. The April 13 missile strike on Sumy, which killed numerous civilians during a religious service, has been condemned internationally and is considered by some experts as an obvious war crime. So how can you help? You can help by making a donation. You go to our United for Ukraine webpage. We have verified and vetted organizations that you can donate to. You can also add your voice by posting on your social media platforms, supporting war propaganda, and signing petitions calling for the end of the war, for the end of the invasion or a ceasefire. Also, you can also boycott Russia goods, which are every item with the barcode 460 to 496. It's a Russian export, and the profit may be used to fund the invasion. We also encourage you to follow trusted media. United 24 is a good source of news, and other include the Ukrainska Pravda, the Kyiv Independent, and the Ukrainian. And as I said, we also stand in solidarity with other countries and regions facing conflict. So here are a brief list of countries that are also facing conflict. We have Syria, we have South Sudan, we have Haiti, we have Burkina Faso, we have Ethiopia, we have Myanmar, we have Afghanistan, we have Somalia, we have Mali, we have Democratic Republic of Congo, we have Central African Republic, we have Nigeria, we have Yemen. Sorry, this was the announcements for today's events. So thank you. So now the floor is open for anyone that might have something that they would love to share. So if you have any questions or if you have any updates that you would like to share concerning anything you've heard in the news or something you've come across, or even the updates that have been shared, please feel free to raise your hand and I would call on you. Thank you very much, Samu. Please just tell us your name and where you're connecting from. Please feel free to share your updates.
Okay, so I'm Sammu and I'm from Sri Lanka. So I'm giving the contents of what's happening in Sri Lanka towards the war in Russia and Ukraine. So we do have an embassy and a consular office in Sri Lanka for Russia. And there is a bit, Sri Lanka was going through a war and we have like trained soldiers for war. So Russia is, they do it in a very illegal manner. They they say they're paying, and they try to import the soldiers of our country for the war. And there are a lot of documentaries and a lot of videos which I could share on the platform that is done illegally through various platforms. And those soldiers who go for this war for some reason to be representative of Russia is not paid, or not given any facilities. They are just taken into a direct war of another country, and this is done by the Russian embassy itself knowingly. So they're buying military soldiers from different countries, and they don't pay them. Nothing is happening. And now there are a lot of protests going in Sri Lanka to bring back the soldiers whom were misguided. They were given a propaganda saying they have been imported for the safety of Russian civilians, but then they're directly taken to the war of the Russia. So that's something that is happening in Sri Lanka hugely nowadays. And there is no voice raised, or people are not aware of the cruelty that is done there.
All right, thank you very much, Sumu. Thank you for sharing. And please, I'm going to be putting the forum's link on the chat, so please feel free to share also the links to the videos you mentioned. Thank you very much. To anyone interested, please go there to watch. All right, so please, do we have any other person that has something to share? Please, you can feel free to raise your hand. If you have something you'd like to share, updates, questions you have that you heard concerning the war, concerning the updates.
Тулиться близенько до підніжжя гір, а на тому боці там живе Марічка, в хаті, що сховалась у зелений пір. А на цьому боці там живе Марічка, в хаті, що сховалась у зелений пір.
Any thoughts concerning what's happening in Ukraine and various updates that have been shared?
Берегом так пізно, мовчазний ходжу, там на тому
Please, if you're not able to speak right now, please feel free to write in the chat. If you're not able to speak, maybe where you are is noisy, then please feel free to write in the chat. Everyone can read, or I can read out to the group.
загубив я спокій, і туди дороги я не знаходив.
Maybe you can also write from which countries you are in chat. Just put name of country. And also interesting because we know like I guess there are many Ukrainians and also people from Turkey and I hope Rwanda as well. Okay.
Okay, please feel free. We'll still have another session towards the end of today's event to open the room once again for you to share your updates or share your thoughts concerning what you have heard and what was shared during
We have in room one more Crimean Tatars. Nice, nice, nice.
Okay.
Zambia.
As I said, we have a special event today. So I would just like to hand over now to our UPG Peace Ambassadors. We have Danka and Lydia in the room. So they would come up now to introduce the event to you properly and also introduce our guest speaker that would be taking us through the deportations of Crimean Tatars in 1944. Thank you very much, Danka and Lydia.
Thank you, Gochi, and thank you for this opportunity to actually make this event as a part of weekly United for Ukraine meeting. It's really a pleasure for us to participate in this activity. I will shortly share agenda of our main session. First of all, we would like to shortly introduce who we are and what is our project about. Then we will have Lia with her presentation and Q&A session. And after that, we prepared for you just like little activity. Yep. Lydia and I presenting, actually we are initiators of Walls to Witness from Rwanda to Ukraine project, or in Ukrainian it's Стіни свідчать від Рванди до України. We started this project, I guess, more than 1 year ago. And at the beginning we made really huge plans. We had plans for big art project, but after that we decided to realize this project by small steps. And we participated with Lydia in Youth in Exchange in Ukraine program, funded by Bogdan Gavrilishin family, and actually Bogdan Gavrilishin Family Foundation really support our project and now, and we're also grateful for them. So mainly our project concentrate, like big aim of our project is to make relationship between two faraway countries, Ukraine and Rwanda, stronger by talking about such important historical event as the deportation of Crimean Tatars and genocide in Rwanda. And so far we realized like several activities. One of them was online lesson between Ukrainian and Rwandan youth. And also we almost finished an exhibition dedicated to genocide against Tutsi. And we plan to host this exhibition in several museums in Ukraine. And today we have like one more event, like this special lecture about deportation of Crimean Tatars. Yeah, and we're really so happy that there are like not only Rwandans, not only Ukrainians, not only Crimean Tatars, but representative from other country. Lydia, maybe you wanna just add something because you've been now also.
Yeah, Danica, thank you. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a loud place, so I will be shortly, and I hope that you all can hear me. Thank you so much for coming. This project has been a passion child of Danica and me. Yeah, we were really occupied by it for a really long time, and I guess probably the main idea of it can be best said. There was one girl that actually she was the one who was sharing the updates about Sri Lanka. Is that there is definitely the tendency that Russians they recruit more foreign soldiers from the countries where Ukraine isn't present. Unfortunately, I guess there isn't any Ukrainian embassies in Sri Lanka, as there isn't any Ukrainian presence or activities, diplomatic or economical, in many countries, which is a big problem. And one might say, for example, I'm from Sri Lanka. How does the war between Ukraine and Russia can affect me? It actually can. And because of the examples like that, when we are constantly intertwined in the events that might be thousands of miles or kilometers apart, it's really important to know each other, to learn from history. And what we are presenting right now to you is the history of Eastern Europe, the region where we are from. And particularly today, we would like to present to you the history of Crimean Tatars. It's one of the indigenous population of Ukraine, of Crimea. And it's just, that history is very important for us. But we also believe that it's going to be really important for the people to understand more what is happening right now, what has happened then, and just, trying to connect all of these dots. So yeah, what I can wish you is to be active, ask as many questions as you want, and yeah, have a really amazing speaker who would share her thoughts and insights. Lia, yeah, maybe we should introduce Lia right now. Yeah.
Yeah, Lia, we're passing through to you. Lia is Crimean Tatars activist. And it's really, really great opportunity to have you here. So floor to you.
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers of the event for giving me a platform to speak about Crimea and my people. And also thank you everyone for coming to my lecture, because I think that it's extremely important right now to talk about Crimea. I believe many of you have been following the news recently. Right now, world leaders are making decisions about the future of Ukraine and Crimea in particular, without consulting us, the Ukrainians and the Crimean Tatars. For example, in a recent interview, Donald Trump stated that Crimea should be legally recognized as a part of Russia. The real problem lies in the arguments that he uses. Every one of them is rooted in Russian propaganda and in Russian myths that Russia has been creating about the peninsula. And unfortunately, today, when the world leaders are discussing Crimea, they don't even mention the indigenous people of the peninsula, the Crimean Tatars, which shows just how effective the Russian propaganda has been, because the world has forgotten about our existence. So one of the main tasks of Russian propagandists has been to deny that the Crimean Tatars are the indigenous people of Crimea. And as you can see, we still deal with the consequences of this today, as many people continue to believe that Crimea has always been Russian, primarily populated by Russians. So to achieve this, the Russian historians began fabricating their own version of Crimea's history, portraying the native Crimean Tatar population as invaders who arrived in the 13th century alongside the Mongols. This distortion was also a tool, an imperial tool, which was used to justify centuries of forced displacement and repression. And the problem is that it's not something that remained in the past. Russia, starting from 2014, continued to spread this narrative, this propaganda, that Crimean Tatars are invaders in Crimea, that Crimean Tatars are not indigenous, and that Crimea has always been Russian. However, the roots of the Crimean Tatar people trace back long before the Mongol invasion. In fact, we are the descendants of all the peoples, of all nations and tribes that have lived on the Crimean Peninsula throughout history. The Mongol invasion of the 13th century and the rule of the Golden Horde, of course, influenced the Crimean population, but it did not mark the beginning of our history. It was simply another layer in our complex heritage. So our formation as a nation was not a sudden event, but a long and gradual process that spanned centuries. The Crimean Tatars are the indigenous people because they were formed as a distinct people in Crimea. They did not migrate from elsewhere, as Russia states. And Crimea has always been their homeland, where Crimean Tatars developed their unique culture, traditions, language, and identity. And I think it's worth to mention that today, Ukraine and the European Union officially recognize the Crimean Tatars as the indigenous people, as the indigenous population of Crimea. But Russia refuses to acknowledge this status because it directly contradicts its propaganda and long-standing historical myths about the peninsula. Recognizing the Crimean Tatars as indigenous would undermine Russia's narrative that Crimea has always been Russian and expose the reality of centuries of oppression. What is more, I think that the mere presence of Crimean Tatars in Crimea challenges Russia's revisionist history, because their language, traditions, and deep historical ties to the land serve as living proof that Crimea was never originally Russian, and that it actually had a history before the first Russian annexation of the peninsula in 1783. So this is why under Russian rule, the Crimean Tatars have faced systematic persecution, including political repression, restrictions on culture and religious expression, and attempts to erase their historical legacy. Saying that Crimea has always been Russian is not just misleading, but also historically absurd, because Crimea has always been a crossroads of civilizations, and many nations have always lived on the peninsula with various powers controlling it. In fact, Russia has controlled Crimea for the shortest period in its during history, compared to other major empires or states that dominated the peninsula. Russia's control over Crimea began in 1783, when Catherine the Great annexed the peninsula following the Russo-Turkish War. And I think that the Russia's rule over Crimea stands as one of the most destructive periods in the peninsula history. In just 2 centuries, Crimea experienced some of the most profound damage, because during this period, Russia sought to erase or distort its long century, its rich history, in order to promote the narrative that Crimea has always been Russian. Of course, one of the darkest chapters in Crimean Tatar history, in Crimean history, without doubt, was the 1944 deportation, when the entire Crimean Tatar population was deported from Crimea to remote regions of Central Asia and Russia. This tragic event wiped out almost half of the Crimean Tatar population and left unhealing trauma not only on survivors, but also on the next generations of Crimean Tatars. By the time of the deportation, however, the Crimean Tatars were already a minority in Crimea, making up only 20–25% of the population, the result of decades of systematic repression and forced displacement. So I think that when talking about this 1944 deportation, I think it's not an isolated event, and we should see the whole picture. I think it was the tragic culmination of a long history of persecution that started with the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 1783, in the end of 18th century. Because this event, the first annexation of Crimea, led to a period of intense oppression, displacement, and forced assimilation of Crimean Tatars, a time often referred to by historians as Dark Century for Crimean Tatar people. In 1783, Crimea was home for 90% of Crimean Tatars, with no Russians living on the peninsula at that time. However, this situation dramatically changed immediately following the annexation. Because of repression and persecutions, hundreds of thousands of Crimean Tatars fled the peninsula, resulting in multiple waves of immigration. Many of them immigrated to the Ottoman Empire, and this is why one of the biggest diasporas that exist now are in Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. So in 1944, Crimean Tatars were already a minority in Crimea. Russians were a majority. But still, the Russian authorities decided to completely destroy the Crimean Tatar people. Stalin signed an order to deport all Crimean Tatars from Crimea, accusing them of collaborating with the Nazis during the occupation. For context, Crimea was annexed by Nazi Germany for 3 years, and shortly after recovering Crimea, the Soviets organized the deportation, with war still ongoing. However, this accusation of collaborating with Nazis was a pretext to fulfill a long-standing goal of the Soviet and Russian authorities to destruct to destroy the indigenous population of Crimea. On the morning of May 18th, 1944, officers and soldiers, Russian officers, began the mass deportation of Crimean Tatars from all settlements across Crimea. They entered homes of Crimean Tatars early in the morning, announced the deportation orders, and gave families only minutes to gather their belongings. As I mentioned before, the Second World War was still ongoing during the deportation of Crimean Tatars, and this is why almost the entire male population of Crimean Tatars was at the front lines fighting against the Nazis, while their families were being forcibly deported from Crimea. This meant that the majority of those deported were women, children, and elderly. This deportation was in essence genocide, as its aim was to destroy the Crimean Tatars as a nation. The cargo trains traveled for days, and often the passengers were not informed of where they were going, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear. The trains were typically overcrowded, sometimes with more than 100 people packed into a single car. Many Crimean Tatars unfortunately died during the journey, during the deportation, due to starvation, disease, and brutal conditions, but their bodies were often left unburied. Upon arriving in their destinations, primarily in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, other parts of Central Asia, the Crimean Tatars were subjected to a harsh existence. They were labeled as special settlers and were placed under strict control by Soviet authorities. So they were placed at special camps, and these areas were often remote, and the Crimean Tatars were forced to work in labor camps or agricultural settlements. They were given the status of second-class citizens of the Soviet Union. So the first time leaving these special camps was punishable by a 5-day arrest, and a second violation was considered as escape from the place of exile and punishable by 20 years of imprisonment. Also, no one was waiting for Crimean Tatars at their new locations because local residents, poisoned by Soviet propaganda, treated the arriving exiles with suspicion and hostility, calling them traitors and enemies. And this stigma of traitors remained with the Crimean Tatars until the fall of the Soviet Union, because even my grandparents who were born in Uzbekistan were called traitors of the Soviet Union by ordinary people when they found out about their ethnicity. It's estimated that at least 200,000 of Crimean Tatars were deported from Crimea. But also, beside Crimean Tatars, the Soviet authorities deported all other nations from Crimea, such as Armenians, Bulgarians, Italians, Germans, Greeks, and so on. So there's also a really tragic event that happened during this time, because not long after the deportation, the Soviet authorities found out that one of its units had forgotten to deport people from the Arbat Spit, from one area of the Crimean Peninsula. So instead of preparing an additional transfer in trains, they boarded hundreds of Crimean Tatars onto an old boat, took it to the middle of the Azov Sea, and sank the ship. And those who didn't drown were finished off by machine guns. As a result of this deportation, nearly half of the population died, perished in the first few years after being exiled, unfortunately. And the psychological toll on the deported Crimean Tatars was immense, because families were torn apart and communities were displaced without the possibility of returning to their homeland for decades. The trauma of the deportation also led to a loss of all cultural heritage of Crimean Tatars language, as they were cut off from their traditional way of life. And many elders died in exile, and the whole generation grew up in the places of deportation without even seeing their homeland. And here you can see Crimean Tatars in those special camps. They were working in labor camps and agricultural settlements. And my family lived for many centuries in Crimea, in Kerch and Feodosia. It's one of the most important cities in Crimea, but that they changed their lives forever, as one part of my family was deported to the Urals, to Ivanovo Oblast of Russia, and the other part of my family was deported to Uzbekistan. And they lived in special camps as well. And my great-grandmother Halide, who was a child at the time, recalled that they were always hungry and that many people died every day at that special camps, and they were buried in mass graves. They were forced to stay in these special camps for 12 years until Khrushchev lifted the restrictions and people were finally allowed to move. And this allowed my relatives to reunite with the part of the family that had been sent to Uzbekistan. During this period, after Khrushchev lifted the restrictions, Crimean Tatars could move, but they couldn't go to Crimea. They couldn't live in Crimea yet. So, and during this period, Crimea was repopulated by new residents, most of whom were settlers from Russia, and many of them moved into the houses that had belonged to the Crimean Tatars. Crimean Tatar homes, land, and other possession like property, all property became targets for looting. And after the mass deportation of the Crimean Tatars, Soviet authorities not only took steps to physically destroy the population, but also started a systematic process to erase their cultural identity. One of the first actions taken by the Soviet regime was the destruction of the Crimean Tatars' cultural heritage, because all books, all old manuscripts and historical documents belonging to the rich heritage of the Crimean Tatar people were confiscated and destroyed. And this large-scale destruction of historical records made it difficult to preserve their collective memory and history. This elimination of the cultural traces of the Crimean Tatars continued with the physical destruction of their places of worship and cemeteries. Mosques, historical buildings, and sacred sites were demolished or repurposed. And cemeteries, which contained the graves of generations of Crimean Tatars, were desecrated and destroyed. During the deportation, the Crimean Tatars lost much of their cultural heritage, which had been passed down through generations, as they had no time to gather their belongings during the deportation. And in many cases, doing so was forbidden. So in Crimea, the Soviet regime also carried out a process of Russification, which included replacing Crimean Tatar toponyms with Russian names. Cities, towns, and villages that previously had Crimean Tatar names were renamed, and they still preserve those fake Russian names, Russian toponyms in Crimea. So thus erasing the historical and cultural connection the Crimean Tatars had maintained with the land for centuries. This name changing was a symbolic and effective measure to eliminate the presence of Crimean Tatars in the region while promoting a new cultural identity imposed by the regime. In the places where the Crimean Tatars were deported, cultural repression became even stronger, they were not allowed to use the Crimean Tatar language. I mean that Crimean Tatars couldn't even use the Crimean language in the streets because in those places the Russian language was dominant. So even though families spoke Crimean Tatar language inside the families, between relatives, between family members, in the streets, in schools, you had to speak Russian. So this is where Crimean Tatar language became extinct. Like right now, Crimean Tatar language is classified as extinct language by UNESCO. And this was the reason. The 1944 deportation was the reason for this. So over the following decades, the official version promoted by Soviet authorities concealed these events and created a historical narrative that minimized or justified the disappearance of the Crimean Tatars. This narrative attempted to present the Crimean Tatars, as a traitorous minority that needed to be punished. And the deportation was portrayed as a necessary measure for the security of the Soviet state. The history of the Crimean Tatar people was silenced and distorted both in the public sphere and in official historiography, making it difficult to recognize the suffering of the Crimean Tatar people and their struggle to preserve their cultural identity. So following their deportation, the Crimean Tatars were not only removed from their homes, but were also explicitly banned from returning to Crimea. For decades, they were denied the right to return and were kept in remote areas of Central Asia, primarily in Uzbekistan and other parts of Central Asia, as I've already mentioned. And during the Khrushchev mandate, many nations deported by Stalin, such as the Chechens, were allowed to return to their homelands. However, the Crimean Tatars were the only group that remained banned from returning. And only when the Soviet Union started to collapse, Crimean Tatars started to return to Crimea in mass. So the consequences of the deportation were tragic not only for the Crimean Tatar people, but also for Crimea itself, because within a few years, Crimea was transformed into a wasteland, and the region began to decline in all aspects of life. The deportation led to a severe demographic and economic crisis in Crimea, and the Soviet Union, in an attempt to repopulate Crimea, the Soviet authorities resettled people from various regions of Russia, many of whom lacked the knowledge and skills necessary to maintain the local economy. So the deportation of the Crimean Tatar people was one of the key reasons that prompted the Soviet leadership to transfer Crimea to Ukraine in 1954. The official Soviet narrative stated economic reconstruction and geographic proximity as the main justification for the transfer. However, another major factor was the dire state of the Crimean economy, which required substantial investment and labor to recover from both the devastation of World War II and the loss of its indigenous population. Ukraine, with its, of course, inside the Soviet Union, it was seen as better suited to facilitate Crimea's reconstruction and integration into a broader Soviet economy. Despite these efforts, the absence of the Crimean Tatars, who had historically played a crucial role in Crimea's agriculture, trade, and cultural development, meant that the region never fully regained its former vitality. And the Soviet Union actively suppressed any discussion of the deportation and erased Crimean Tatar history from public memory, reinforcing the marginalization of the people who had once called Crimea their homeland. Sorry, 1 second. So today it's difficult to imagine that an entire people being deprived from the right to live in their homeland. But this was the reality for Crimean Tatars for a total of 48 years, for almost 50 years. During this period, many Crimean Tatars attempted to return to Crimea, but their nationality, ethnicity became a barrier, an obstacle to finding employment or obtaining official residency. What is more, all their former homes had already been occupied by new settlers, leaving them with nowhere to go. There were cases where Crimean Tatars managed to return only to be forcibly evicted once again. Soviet authorities refused to recognize their right to live in Crimea, and those who tried to settle were often met with hostility and administrative problems. As a result, many Crimean Tatars were forced to live in regions close to Crimea, such as Kherson Oblast in Ukraine or Krasnodar Krai in Russia, where they hoped to remain as close as possible to their homeland while awaiting a time when they could return permanently. So despite the challenges, the Crimean Tatars never gave up on their struggle for repatriation, and throughout the decades of exile, they organized peaceful protests, peaceful resistance movements, petitions demanding the right to return. The Soviet government, however, continued to enforce the ban. And I think it's worth to mention, it's important to mention the leader of the Crimean Tatar people, Mustafa Dzhemiliev, who played a crucial role in their struggle to return to their homeland after the deportation of 1944. Because of his activism and leadership, he faced constant persecution by Soviet authorities, was arrested multiple times, and spent a total of about 15 years in Soviet prisons and labor camps. Despite the repression, Dzhemiliev remained committed to peaceful resistance and continued to lead the Crimean Tatar national movement, eventually becoming the longtime head of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people. And one of the biggest problems after the return of the Crimean Tatars was the lack of housing, because the land and houses that had belonged to Crimean Tatars before the deportation were already occupied by new settlers, mostly from Russia. Many Crimean Tatars who came back had to build simple shelters on the edges of cities and villages, often without water, electricity, or proper roads. In many cases, local authorities refused to give them legal rights to the land, which led to long legal fights and even police actions against those trying to get their property back. And one of the clearest examples from this time is the story of Musa Mahmud, who set himself on fire in protest against the injustice faced by Crimean Tatars. After returning to Crimea, he was arrested and refused official registration, meaning he wasn't allowed to live legally in his own homeland. In desperation, Musa Mahmud burned himself, an act that became one of the most powerful and heartbreaking symbols of this period. And his story shows how deeply Crimean Tatars wanted to live in their homeland, even if it meant risking their lives or even sacrificing their lives. Many Crimean Tatar families, despite all the hardships they faced, eventually returned to Crimea and rebuilt their lives from scratch. But in 2014, history repeated itself once again. So the 2014 annexation, I think, is just like the 1944 deportation of the Crimean Tatars. It's not an isolated event. It's a continuation of centuries of Russian imperial policies towards Crimea and Crimean Tatars. So in 2014, Crimea faced another occupation when Russia illegally annexed the peninsula. And this event marked a new chapter of oppression and hardship for Crimean Tatars, who once again found themselves targeted for their identity and political stance. When the occupation of Crimea began, I was 12 years old, and I felt it all firsthand because my life has divided into before and after. So my family refused to accept the Russian citizenship because Russians reinforced on Crimean citizens to accept the Russian citizenship. So we became foreigners on our own land, and we were forced to leave our homes due to the fear of persecution of pro-Ukrainian people in Crimea by the occupation regime. And since 2014, my family has settled in Kherson. It's a city in the south of Ukraine, where we have actively participated in various rallies and demonstrations against the occupation of Crimea. And from the very beginning of the occupation, Crimean Tatars strongly opposed the Russia's actions. They organized peaceful protests and publicly rejected the so-called referendum held in March 2014, which was neither free nor fair. In response, the Russian authorities launched a systematic campaign of repression against the Crimean Tatar population. Again, from the first day, Crimean Tatars showed their support for Ukraine because we knew all too well what the consequences of Russian occupation would be. We had experienced them for centuries, and sadly, our fears came true. Under Russian rule, Crimean Tatars faced increasing persecution. The Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people, which had represented their interests since the 1990s, was banned as an extremist organization in 2016. Many of its leaders, including Mustafa Dzhemilev, whom I've mentioned before, and Rifat Chubarov, were banned from entering Crimea, and others were arrested or forced to exile too. And Russian security forces carried out arbitrary arrests, house raids, and kidnappings of Crimean Tatars, particularly those who spoke out against the occupation. Activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens were accused of extremism or terrorism under fabricated charges. Many were sentenced to long prison terms in Russia, with some even disappearing without a trace. It has been 11 years since the occupation of Crimea began, but repression continues to intensify. Almost every day, Russian special forces detain Ukrainians or Crimean Tatars in Crimea who show support for Ukraine. Also, the Russian government targeted Crimean Tatar cultural and religious institutions. Independent media outlets such as ATR, which is the only Crimean Tatar TV channel, were forced to shut down. And here you can see the Bakhchisarai Khan Palace, which is one of the most important historical and cultural sites for the Crimean Tatar people. Built in the 16th century, it was the home of the Crimean Khans and a symbol of their history, identity, and heritage. Because before the annexation, before the first Russian annexation of Crimea, Crimean Tatars had their own state, which was destroyed by Catherine the Great, and it was Crimean Khanate. And so, unfortunately, Russia has repeatedly damaged the palace throughout history. And after Russia first took over Crimea in 1783, they tried to erase the memory of the Crimean Khanate by destroying Tatar landmarks. And during the Soviet era, the palace was neglected because the Crimean Tatars had been forcibly removed from their homeland. And the worst destruction happened after Russia occupied Crimea in 2014. In 2017, Russian authorities started a so-called restoration of the palace. Instead of carefully preserving it, they removed and destroyed original parts of the building. Ancient wooden beams were replaced with concrete, delicate wall paintings were damaged, and historic tiles were taken away. So experts believe that it's not an accident, but a deliberate attempt to erase Crimean Tatar culture. So as a result of these repressive policies, thousands of Crimean Tatars were once again forced to leave their homeland. Many moved to mainland Ukraine, where they sought refuge and continued their struggle for Crimea's deoccupation. Meanwhile, Russia encouraged further settlement of ethnic Russians in Crimea, mirroring Soviet-era tactics of demographic replacement. It's also known that the Russian authorities are distributing houses in Crimea to those who participated in war against Ukraine since 2022. And it's also known that more than 2 million of Russians moved to Crimea since 2014. Meanwhile, Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars continue to leave the peninsula. So from the first Russian annexation of the peninsula to the present, Russian policies in Crimea have followed the same pattern. Erase the indigenous population, the Crimean Tatars, repopulate Crimea with Russians, and suppress cultural identity and rewrite history. So what would mean accepting Russian dominance of Crimea right now for Crimean Tatars? For Crimean Tatars, this would be more than just a political decision. It would be a death sentence for our nation, for our national identity. It would show the world that the disappearance of our people, of our language, our culture, and our history is acceptable. Under Russian control, the assimilation and forced Russification of Crimean Tatars is intensifying. If this occupation is normalized, our fate is clear. We will continue to be silenced, oppressed, and erased. The world's acceptance of Russia's control over Crimea would mean accepting that the Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of the peninsula, may cease to exist as a distinct nation. This is not just about the land, this is about people, about families who have not been able to return home for more than a decade. Because right now, we can talk about a silent deportation, about hybrid deportation since 2014. And it's sad to realize that the world would better recognize Russian occupation of Crimea than recognizing the deportation of the Crimean Tatar people as a genocide, because today only 7 countries recognized the Crimean Tatar deportation as genocide. But if 1783, if 1944 had not happened, people in Crimea would never have spoken Russian, and Russians would never have lived in the peninsula. By accepting this occupation, the world is willing to tolerate Russian imperialism and genocide of native Crimeans. And I think that the occupation of Crimea is not just a political necessity, it's a matter of justice, survival, and historical truth. Only as part of Ukraine can Crimea truly flourish as a part of Europe, embracing democracy, freedom, and human rights. And only within Ukraine can Crimean Tatars fully develop as a nation, reclaim their language, revive their traditions, and rebuild what has been taken from them. The future of Crimea must be of freedom and democracy, not occupation. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Yeah, thank you, Lia. It was really pleasure to hear you, especially your personal story of your family. It was like super informative and touchful, I would say.
Thank you so much. It's actually really difficult to share this because it affected my family and me personally. So if anyone has any questions, I will be glad to respond them.
Yeah, so guys, you can
Yes, Nicole.
either put your hands up and then ask your questions, maybe like your comments, because I guess we also have some Crimean Tatars here. So maybe you would also like to share something. Or you can just write your comments in the chat and then Danica and I, we will read them out for you and Leah would answer them. Yeah, so we can start with Vikrant, right?
Yep. Thank you, Leah, for an extremely powerful presentation and all of your insights. During your presentation, I wrote a question down, so please do allow me to read that out loud for you. In light of the 1944 deportations and the ongoing marginalization of the Crimean Tatars, how do you see the interplay between historical memory, transgenderal trauma, and the contemporary geopolitical narratives shaping the collective identity and the resistance strategies that are essentially in play as we speak today? If you could speak to that, please.
Okay, can you repeat the question but slowly?
Sure.
Because I think there are many points that I can comment.
Sure. So, in light of the 1944 deportations and the ongoing marginalization of the Crimean Tatars, how do you see the interplay between historical memory, transgenerational trauma, and the contemporary geopolitical narratives that are shaping the collective identity and the resistance strategies of the Crimean Tatar people today?
So I think the 1944 deportation shaped the Crimean Tatar identity and political position in 2014 because of this collective memory, because of this collective trauma that was passed through generation of Crimean Tatars. We knew what Russia is. We knew what consequences could Russia bring to Crimea for Crimean Tatars. And from the beginning, for example, on the example of my family, since the first day we knew that we would leave Crimea, that we would leave our homeland, and that we would never accept Russian citizenship because we knew that if we stay in Crimea, we could be persecuted. Because personally, in my family, we are politically active and we couldn't be silent. If many Crimean Tatars, this is why many Crimean Tatars suffered persecution and repression starting from 2014. So yes, I believe that 1944 was a decisive event that shaped even modern Crimean Tatar political position towards Russia. And this is why we support Ukraine. We supported Ukraine since 2014, and Crimean Tatars were like the main pro-Ukrainian force in Crimea since 2014. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you so much, too.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let's keep it rolling. You can write your questions in the chat, or you can also raise your hand and we just okay, there's another one. I guess you can also voice them, so there's no problem. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for everyone here from the region and beyond. Please feel free to answer it either in the chat or by unmuting when you have a chance. In an era where geopolitical interests often overshadow human suffering.
It's the same, maybe a question, but send it with delay. Yeah, no? Sorry.
How?
Okay, go on.
In an era where geopolitical interests often overshadow human suffering, how can international diplomacy recalibrate to center the human, empathy, justice, and dignity in responding to asymmetric conflicts like the war in Ukraine? So it's an interesting question. I think it's not just regarding Crimean Tatars, but in general. Yes, and actually, I noted that right now there's so much suffering, there's so many wars and genocide happening in the world. So I think that people are getting used to bad news. Unfortunately, people are used to the news about missile strikes, for example, in Ukraine, about the genocide. But I think right now, in the era where the social media are so important, it's important to be active, to be not indifferent, and to use your social media to promote human rights, to spread the truth about different wars, different geopolitical situations. Yeah, I think that we can use social media to talk more about human rights and about nations that were repressed or genocided, even now. This is what I've been doing since like 2022. I would love to hear from Lydia and Danka as well, please, about their thoughts.
Oh, actually, okay. I might just like make it something short, so then Olubadun go ahead after me, and then I would say something. But I would definitely tell, like, so I studied history, like maybe some of you know that, guys, and like we often like talk about system of diplomatic relationship, like Westphalia, and the one that was after the other one that was after the Second World War, when we got to the UN, other agencies. And I guess we should really start talking that maybe a lot of these agencies, a lot of these institutions, they were created for good, but they are not really open with all of those tasks. They are really failing us. They are, for example, were created to avoid genocide, to stop them. And another part of our project with Danka, that's the history about Rwanda and the genocide in Rwanda. And this is the one example when the humanity, when our system and institutions failed completely. There were UN soldiers, but they did nothing. There were international organizations, but they did nothing, and they just stood and watched. So maybe it was like the first bell, but now we get so many of those bells in Crimea, in Ukraine in general. So maybe we should really start to think, how can we take all of these institutions that are doing something, but they are failing on some of the aspects, and then try to rebuild them somehow, or maybe create something new.
Okay, someone wants to answer this question, or should we move to another one?
I think you said enough. I just like completely agree with Lydia. We can move to Olabudun question because he is raising hands. Please, Olabudun, remember we don't have like 1 hour for question, so try to make it shortly. We will really appreciate.
Can I answer a question in
Okay.
chat? Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I guess we
Okay.
can
like
go
after
with
Olabudun.
Olabudun, and then we will go to Merve in chat.
I know
Okay.
that you have
All right.
presentations about Lia, about his noise. Okay, Olabudun.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. What a touching presentation from Lia. And I want to, use this moment to, appreciate and, the Ukrainian community, for being strong, going through these experiences. And, we are far away, but, nothing can take the place of you who are affected. And now, the Crimean Tatar case is very, very similar to the treatment of, the Kurds, the Uyghurs, the Rohingyas, the Armenians, and which shows, throughout history that the strong, they kind of get away with anything they want, which is very, very sad. Everybody has the right to live and to live the way they want it. Unfortunately, even the United Nations and world organizations have always sided the strong. And so the proximity of Russia and the deliberate replacement of the Crimean Tatars after the deportation, the state-sponsored marginalization means that there can never be any robust opposition. And the issue of Crimea has gotten as a strategic angle, as an economic angle, to the Russians, which also means that they won't let go. And when you look at the takeover, it was something that we can see, because Yanukovych was pro-Russia.
Okay, Olaputun, I love you so much. Please get to your point. Love you. All the love.
My,
Yeah.
my question is this. Since it is obvious that 20% of Ukrainian land has already been taken over by the Russians, and it also means that negotiations are ongoing deliberately to ensure that parts of the territories, most especially the Crimean region, be ceded off to the Russians. What are the plans of those in those regions, the Crimeans and those in the Donbass and Donetsk regions? If, peradventure, those places are ceded to the Russians, what are the plans? And if eventually, against the will of the people, the land was ceded to these people, how do you ensure that the rights of these people are protected? How do you ensure that state-sponsored marginalization does not happen or is eradicated and people stand on equal footing, whether you are Russian, whether you are any nationality, in the Donbass region, the Donetsk, and the Crimean region? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, if to sum up, I can do that, and then you can say if I still have to try. So, like, what's the plan if those if Crimea and the occupied parts of Ukraine, they would be treated like hypothetically, not like what's the plan to protect the people? I guess that was
What's the plan to protect people in
Yeah.
those regions if they stay with Russia or if they
yeah,
will be
like
deoccupied?
like if this occupation becomes something more of a matter of fact and it's like recognized.
We
as-
cannot protect.
Yeah.
We cannot protect. The only way, the only option is to deoccupy Crimea and to deoccupy all territories occupied by Russia. Because if they stay with Russia, all our people, like Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars, would be victims of Russian oppression policies. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and what adds it like Russia tried to hide all these like all Russian violations that Russians do with Crimean Tatars and other proactive Ukrainians in temporary occupied Ukrainian regions. That's why we don't have like enough information what actually
Exactly.
is going on there. Yeah.
Exactly. I hope it's enough. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, I think the only way is to deoccupy Crimea. The only way is to deoccupy all our territories. Because as I've already said during my presentation, accepting the Russian occupation of Crimea, it would be a death sentence for Crimean Tatars because we are being persecuted, we are being killed and crucified during all those 11 years. And each year it's worse and worse. And it's really sad. So, and also there's another question in chat. As a Crimean Tatar myself, rediscovering my roots after assimilation, I was wondering what books, articles you could recommend to learn about Tatars, Crimean Tatars. So I would recommend you to follow my Instagram account because I have a link in my bio with all resources in English and in Ukrainian, with all books, audios, videos about Crimean Tatars. So my Instagram account is Crimea.comeback. Crimea comeback. It's simple. Or just search by my name, Lia Ğazi. And also, thank you so much for your comments. I truly hope you all liked my presentation and lecture. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, I can type it there. Crimea, come back.
I sent a link, so you also can.
Right now I can't send link. Instagram, Crimea, come back. And Twitter is from Lia.
Yeah, we have Hande.
Hello, everyone. I am Hande. I'm
Hello.
Turkey. and I wanted to share my feelings also. I am doing some European Union projects in like Erasmus Plus projects. I have an NGO in Spain, and I do a lot of projects with Ukraine actually. Like I came back from a project in Slovakia because there are many people, since you can not fly, like you have to come by train most of the time, and they came to the project by train, like maybe one day in one day or something like that. And every time I meet people from Ukraine, like I see the pain in them also. Like I'm asking, do you want to, maybe you don't want to go back, maybe you want to stay here in Slovakia, or maybe you want to go somewhere else, but they're like, no, I want to stay even though there's the situation is bad. I wanted to ask, like, about the military, like how are you gonna fix the population, male population, after the war? Because there are, I don't know, there will be a lot of women and there will be less male over time, and I
In
don't know how you can stop this.
Do you mean in Ukraine in general?
Yeah, in Ukraine, because like they are all going to the war most of the time. The male population is getting less and less, which is going to be bad for you, no?
Yes, exactly. But I don't know, like this question is not regarding Crimea.
I guess it's like more
Uh,
of a generally oriented. It's like I guess it's like something that we Ukrainians think a lot, right? Like we also think about this problem that there are significant demographical damages for us, and they're also pretty bad in Crimea as well. Even though, uh, maybe you can tell about this situation that Russians, they are trying to recruit Crimeans to the Russian army. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
you can
yes, yes.
like redirect it to that area because it's also offense to me.
because
Yeah,
whenever we have a project, like organization is always saying that we cannot send the boys. Most of the time the girls are coming, and sometimes like if they are young kids, like if they are younger than 18, they are able to come to the projects and share their feelings. But about this situation, because like I don't know, if this persists, it's gonna be a really huge problem also.
actually in Ukraine, in Crimea, there's many problems. There are many problems, especially regarding demographic situation, because I also mentioned in my presentation that the major problem, demographic problem in Crimea, is that the majority of the population are Russians, and also more than 2 million Russians immigrated to Crimea since 2014. So after the occupation of Crimea, I think that all those Russians that came to Crimea, they would be deported from Crimea because they're like illegal settlers. They are on a foreign land. And regarding the mobilization of the Crimean Tatar men, yes, it's sad. And the saddest part is that we personally cannot do anything about this. But since 2022, I think that many Crimean Tatar men left the peninsula and they are still living in exile. It was like another wave of Crimean Tatar immigration from Crimea when the mobilization began. And after the occupation, I think a long time and it's in distant future. But I have a hope in our diasporas in Turkey and in other countries, because I've spoken with other Crimean Tatars who were born like in Turkey, in Romania, in other countries, and they plan to return to Crimea after the occupation.
Yeah.
So
Also military is obligatory, and like we have also like terrorists, and like if you imagine that you're a male and you went to the east part of Turkey, possibly die there, because like there's always attacks and all these things. So but right now I think like we still have, like, I mean, the situation is a bit under control. Before it was worse, but right now is better, a little bit better.
I would like to add, to your question, Henda. Henda, oh, Боже. That Henda, yes? Perfect. I always struggle with names, frankly speaking. So I would like to add that not only men die in this war, unfortunately, because of Russian attack, many children, many women are dying as well. It's also like one fact. Another fact is that actually we have not only men in Ukrainian military forces, we have women, and my personal my like good acquaintance people, like many people whom many women actually whom I know, they participated like voluntarily to join it to military forces, Ukrainian military forces. Yeah, so it's also matter. Yep.
Actually, I have a Turkish friend that he really liked Ukraine, and he was in Lviv for a while. Then he was a volunteer in Romania, and he said like, I'm gonna be a volunteer for Ukraine, and he went to the army. But then 1 week later, he had a fight with someone there, and they kicked him out from the army. But he was there.
From Ukrainian army?
Yeah, he came to Ukraine.
Oh.
This project. He went to Ukraine just to fight for Ukraine, and he was in Ukraine for a while. But then they deported him. Now he's in Moldova. I don't know. Something happened. I don't know. But it's like he really liked Ukraine, and he's like, there are many Turkish people actually wants to do this. And I have like two of my cousins, they are married to Ukrainian women. So like in Turkey, it's very common. I was talking about this last week as well. Like we have a lot of connections with Ukraine. Also, we have connections with Russia. I had been in Russia, but now we are supporting Ukraine more, of course, in this situation. I have like my cousin's wife, actually, it's half Ukrainian, half Russian.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So let's move on, probably. Okay, Olabudun, do you want to do a second round? You can, but please make it shorter and make it to the point. Yeah.
Okay, 12% or 15% of Crimean Tatars are actually in the Crimean Peninsula currently. A majority are marginalized. How do you hope that the occupation is going to be successful, considering the fact that those that are in diaspora, scattered across other countries, very few of them live life or have life the way they want it to go? So how would the occupation, if peradventure the occupation happens, with the current figure on ground and the economic and social status, as well as those that are coming from abroad, how do you think that is going to work? Do you have a time frame in mind or something?
Lydia, can you tell me in short, because I think I hear badly.
Yeah. I also guess I heard a bit badly, but from what I understood, is like there's going to be a lot of challenges after the war, and what is the strategy to tackle them demographically, socially, politically, and so on.
I think demographically, I've already commented it. I think that after the occupation, I will answer shortly. After the occupation, it's important that the Crimean Tatar national autonomy would be created because Crimea since 1991 was like Crimean autonomy, but autonomy for whom? It was autonomy for Russians because basically Russians controlled Crimea. They participated in the Crimean parliament and they decided everything, but Crimean Tatars couldn't decide anything about Crimea. So I think that one of the first steps of Ukrainian government after the occupation should be the creation of this Crimean Tatar autonomy. And thus we can restore Crimean Tatar language, we can rebuild everything and restore the historical justice.
Yeah. And I would add
I-
for that it also a part of decolonization, actually.
Yes,
Decolonizations from
exactly.
Russians. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's decolonization in all aspects of life in Crimea, because even the names of cities, even the names of villages will be renamed again into Crimean Tatar names. So
Okay,
yes.
yeah, we have also one question in the chat from Trent again. Considering the continuous issues of territorial sovereignty, particularly Crimea and Donbass, and Ukraine's aspirations toward NATO membership, how can peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine reconcile the principles of international law with the geopolitical security concerns of both parties without such a precedent that undermines the what? Oh, I've lost the message. So basically, as far as I get,
Do you believe we are past of that point?
yeah. So like how the possible negotiations between Ukraine and Russia can lead to something productive, and like to some sort of a, I don't know, like middle party peace, so that it could work. Yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah.
Like
I think you mentioned that this question is for everyone.
yeah, for everyone. So like I can tell you from my point, but I suspect for some reason that we might be on the same page on that. There is a like we all see that this war is going to end in some sort of negotiations. Then that's happened. That's going to happen. But at this current point, there is not really much of sense on products and productivity coming from the peace talks with Russians, because from all our history and all of the examples that we have is that even with the Russians, they always play the double game. So in my point of view, the only way that we can do it is that Russian should be weak enough so that we would and only at this point would they be willing to negotiate something or come something. Until they think that they have the upper hand or they are trying to play someone over, they are going to be continuing the war. And there's always like a difference between Russia, what Russia says and what Russia does. They might say you everything, ceasefire for Easter, ceasefire for 9th of May, or for 9th of May, yeah. But in reality, it doesn't matter anything. They still shoot, they still kill. It just doesn't happen like that.
I would add for this that like for me, like the firstly for how to say firstly it's super important that Russia recognize all crimes that it did like for all the Ukrainian nation, and it would be perfect if Russia also recognized all crimes that he did in whole history for other nations as well, for the territories which Russia occupied. Yeah, so I don't know how to say, but for me it feels like you can't negotiate. It's really hard to negotiate with Russia when Russia doesn't recognize like all crimes it did. So yeah.
I guess we would really like Russia to act, for example, like the British Empire or like the France. So like they at some point all of these nations they've said, okay, we've done some pretty bad things and let's recognize them. They didn't do it to the full extent, but there are some reflections. So maybe we were the bad guys for other nations. Maybe we did something wrong, but there is no talks like that from Russia. So at this point, there comes very little productivity from that as well. Yeah. Okay. So, do we have any more questions? Or maybe Leah, would you like to comment on that, or how do you feel?
Oh, if you have like any thoughts that you would like to share, it's also welcome. You can just raise hand and microphone about presentation about Crimean Tatars deportation. I know that there are others, Crimean Tatars, you also one more question.
In what ways can art in its diverse forms like music, painting, film, and performance serve not just as a medium of expression, but as a powerful tool to galvanize public support, preserve culture identity, and sustain the momentum of the movement during prolonged struggles for justice and liberation? A very philosophical one. Yeah. So how can art help us? Like, basically, I guess it's something that you mentioned in your presentation, Leah, that because of the deportation and other stuff that's happening, that there was a serious damage to the Crimean Tatar culture. How do you see it right now developing and reviving again? Is this an ongoing thing for you?
You know, I think that the natural habitat where Crimean Tatars can create art, create music, dances is Crimea, of course, but right now it's occupied. And of course, Russia suppresses any kind of Crimean Tatar cultural revival. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And again, we should occupy Crimea to restore the Crimean Tatar lost cultural heritage, Crimean Tatar language. And there are many, there are also some people, some Crimean Tatars who immigrated from Crimea and they're trying to revive the language. They are trying to create something. But still, there are many obstacles. I think there are many problems because our natural place where we can create something is Crimea. And the problem is that it's occupied right now.
I would like actually to add for this, like for my example, I'm just Ukrainian. I'm not in Crimean Tatar, but actually I started like first, like one of the reason when I started like to research more about Crimean Tatar history was actually movies and Crimean Tatars music, especially like one of my favorite Ukrainian movies is The Domu. I don't know, have Homewards. Yes, Leah,
Homewards, yeah.
Homewards. It's
Yes,
by
there's a famous Crimean Tatar filmmaker, Artem Seytablayev, and he also created a film Haitarma, and it's about the 1944 deportation of Crimean Tatars. So I recommend to watch it. It's called Haitarma.
I also watch.
It translates as the return.
Yeah, I also watched it, and it's really, I mean, like, it's really cool that we have like many active Crimean Tatars artists and singer, for example, Jamala as well. And
Yes.
I
Mhm.
guess many of you might know that she won Eurovision in 2016, yes, with song, actually a song dedicated to deportation of Crimean Tatar, 1944. Yeah. And one of my favorite song, I might pronounce it incorrectly, but it's like El Gizem Krim or something like that.
Yes.
Yes, and it also, yeah.
It's actually a really symbolic song because it was sang during the deportation period by Crimean Tatar people, and it symbolizes the longing for Crimea.
Okay, it has been very productive. Thank you, guys. So if we don't have the questions, then I propose that we do the final activity of our project. So as you know, that's the whole project for Danka and me. And one thing that we would like to do is to take your reflections, your personal thoughts that you had during this session and put them on walls because our project is called Walls to Witness. So I will share with you right now a link to the Padlet. And there is like I can maybe can I also share my screen with you so that I can show how it works. Um, I'll send it right now in the chat. Yeah, so you have now the link. You can go through. Let me share. Yes, you can see. So there's the Padlet. 1, 2, 3, 4. You are supposed to see right now. So yeah, that's the Padlet. That's our imaginative wall that we put there for you to write your emotions that you had during today's session, your feedback, your stories. How do you feel about this this event that we just told you about Lia's presentation? So yeah, you can basically tell anything that you would like to express about what you learned. Maybe write it as a message to Crimean Tatars. Maybe write it as something that that has made you reflect on your country's history or on your personal story. It's really important. You can also assign it as, I don't know, Danica from Ukraine or Vikrant from wherever you are from. And then we would gather all of these feedbacks, and we would make like a book from them, and then other people would be able to read it, other Crimean Tatars, and they would be able to read and feel what people from other countries feel about their history. So that's the main idea. You're supposed to there's like in the bottom a plus. You put it, and then you can write like some topic. You can write some text here. You can put some images, or I don't know, whatever you want, and then you can leave your feedback here. And I write something like this. Then I press publish. Mine is in Ukrainian as well, and then there's gonna be some text here. So yeah, that's the thing that we would like to do, but we are not going to do it just just for to do. We are going to listen to some Crimean Tatar songs meanwhile. Yeah, so like, do you have any requests what you would like to hear? I guess we can start from Mike and Purim, or yeah, that's the special request from Danica, and then we can also move to some. I guess we will do it in like, I guess 7 minutes would be enough, and then you have the link. You can also maybe take more time to write something. I will just yeah, you have the link, and then you can write a couple of messages if you want. Just however. So yeah, let's have like 7 minutes for that, and we will start with how do I write it with Mike is put in. Okay, that was the improvisation.
It's El Güzem, I think.
El Güzem
I think.
Krem. Nein, that was something El Güzem. Güzem.
You started learning Crimean Tatars,
Oh, really?
so I just like I'm joking.
Okay, I need someone to write me it in
I
the
will
chat.
I know.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Miriam has already.
Yeah,
Miriam, thank you, Miriam.
thank you, Miriam. You saved my life. So yeah, let's leave it just like a 7 minutes for you to write it, and then we would continue with the closing of our session. Oh, why can't I copy? Thank you so much.
Lydia, you can put Mich Rivny Krim, and it's in Ukrainian and in Crimean Tatars. So.
Okay, I would like to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
find it.
No. Well,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's fine. Oh, but you maybe don't hear my sound, or do you hear it? Yeah, share computing sound.
You need to stop sharing and share again and click share
Yeah.
sound. You need to stop sharing. You didn't select share
Do you hear it
sound.
now? Do you hear it now? Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Share sound. Okay. No?
Kavuştadan esken yeller yüzüme vurdu.
Balalıkta osken yerler gözüme düştü.
Ben bu yerde yaşamadım, yaşlığıma doyamadım. yaşlığıma doyalmadım.
Vatanıma hasret oldum ey güzel Kırım.
Bahçelerim, meyveleri, bal ile şerbet.
Sularını içe içe doyalmadım ben.
Ben bu yerde yaşamadım, yaşlığıma doyalmadım.
Vatanıma hasret oldum ey güzel Kırım. Ben bu yerde yaşamadım, yaşlığıma doyamadım. Vatanıma hasret oldum ey güzel Kırım.
If you're struggling with Padlet, just let us know in chat
Yeah.
somewhere. We will help.
Yeah,
somehow.
please let us know because we would really like to
Lydia,
have some.
am I got you correctly? We plan to put in notebook,
Yes,
yes?
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just like a bit clarify what is not a book.
Yeah.
So as a part of our project, we also plan to create 2 notebooks, and the main idea of these notebooks is to pass some personal reflection. And the idea is that Ukrainians who will visit our exhibition in Rwanda, they will like live this reflection about genocide against Tutsi in one notebook, and then we pass this notebook to Rwanda, and the same we will do with notebook about Crimean Tatar deportation. All we expect that all visitors who visited like our event dedicated to Crimean Tatar deportation, like they also leave some message about what they are feeling about this topic and so on. It's especially important if you like heard about Crimean Crimean Tatar deportation at first, like yeah, and then we will print these 2 notebooks, and it would be like, I don't know, like live history or something like that, place where history will be connect or will be history will be.
The picture
You
will
got me.
be, will be shown. So yeah, let's give it some couple more minutes, and then we can like basically till the end of the sound, and then you can also fill it out later. You have the link, and
Yeah, well, if you are struggling with Padlet, you just feel free to leave a message in Zoom. We will make a screenshot and then we'll just put it.
Kartlarımız elini yayıp dualar eder. Ben bu yerde yaşamadım, yaşlığıma doyalmadım.
Vatanıma hasret oldum ey güzel Kırım.
Ben bu yerde yaşamadım, yaşlığıma doyalmadım.
So yeah, that was about it. I will put the link once again in the chat so you can also maybe do it later if you want. And I just had a small realization as we were listening to the song that there's this line, "Yaşlıyım da doyamadım," and this is something that Jamala used in her 1944 song. That's one I know really well, so it was really nice how she referenced everything. Yeah, there's a lot of beauty in it. So I guess that would be it for today for the event. Yeah, and then we will continue to close the event, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you everyone for coming. We a bit over time, but it was really a pleasure actually to hear your questions, and it was really pleasure to have you all from different countries. And special thanks again to Leah that you agreed to be a guest speaker and shared your story and make such great presentation. Yep.
Thank you so much too.
I would also like to say again, thank you, Lia. It was just amazing. I had goosebumps at certain moments. It was just amazing. And thank you all guys for coming, for being so attentive. Yeah, for your questions. Thank you.
Let's do it the UPG way, please. Let's show them so much love. I mean, it has really been an educative and interactive session. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, thank you very much, Anka and Lydia, for the project and even deciding to share your project with us. Thank you. And very glad to have even learned about the Crimean Tatar people and also sending them all of they have not been forgotten and their origin, Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay, so we're gradually coming to the end of today's session. Thank you everyone that have joined us. As I stated earlier, for those who are just joining, this is a United for Ukraine session, and we meet every week. We stand united for Ukraine and in solidarity with other countries on region facing conflicts. So thank you all very much for joining. The RSVP link should be updated soon, and you're free to please RSVP for the next event, which will be holding next week, Wednesday. And also, please, we encourage you to also come on the forum. You can write, I think the links, necessary links will be also be posted on the forum. So please, you can check it out and share your thoughts also on today's message, today's topic. Thank you all very much. I'm seeing some old faces. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for those returning. Very glad to have you here. Hope to also see you next week. So to bring today's session to a close, I would just like to ask our guest if she has any final words. So I now ask the UPG Peace Ambassadors if they have any final words for us before we then close today's session. So Lia, do you have any final words?
I just want to thank you so much for hosting me, for giving me a platform to speak about Crimea. As I mentioned before, right now we're living in difficult times, and unfortunately, the world leaders are thinking about ceding Crimea to Russia. And yes, I just want to thank you for giving me a platform to spread the truth, to talk about Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of Crimea, and our struggle, our long century struggle. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Next, I hand over to UPG Peace Ambassadors, Lydia, Danka. Any final words?
Yeah, I can start and then you will close it. Again, thank you so much for coming. This project means a lot for Lia, for Danka, for me, because it's really important to tell about Ukraine, to tell about Crimea, about different sides of Russian colonialism. And again, coming back to the beginning of this session is that we might be living on different parts of the world, but still the events that happen somewhere in Ukraine or I don't know, somewhere in other parts of the world they still matter to us because it's all in Japan. And thank you so much again for coming and for listening to us today. For the great audience, and thank you again to Lia. She's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And Danke too.
I can say just like thank you again, and I hope like one day we also meet we will also meet in such like warm circle, and I hope it also will be next session will be dedicated to the occupation of Crimea, when Crimea will be deoccupied, and Leah when she will come back to Crimea will share a story how actually she returned to her homeland. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
we
you
all
very much.
hope for the liberation of Crimea. Thank you.
Our hearts are wishes of all. Truly, yes. What affects one affects all in one way or the other. So thank you all very much. So to bring today's session to a close, we will first play the Ukrainian national anthem. And after the anthem, play one more song. And that song will give us the opportunity to say our hellos, our goodbyes. And at the end of that song, then we would close the room. So thank you all very much for joining. Thank you for your presence. You each telling us we're here united for Ukraine and in solidarity with other countries and regions facing conflict. Thank you for your time. Do have a wonderful rest of the day. DJ is the national anthem.
Вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануєм ми, браття, у своїй сторонці, душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Judith. It's really I'm really happy to see you here. I just use this opportunity to say.
Beni
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, Judith. I think she's in the room. She's still in the room. Yeah. Nice to have you around. Lydia, Andy, Danka, you guys did well.
I just wondering, okay.